Welcome to the deep dive. So today we're taking on a source that presents this lineage of thought that's, well, it's so compelling and frankly pretty unsettling.
It really is.
It forces you to just completely reconsider where some of our modern crises and, technology and policy actually come from.
Oh.
We're bridging nearly 6 centuries here.
Yeah.
We're looking at how this notorious 15th century text, the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches, is basically the architectural blueprint for the ethical problems we're facing now with 21st century large language models.
That's absolutely right. And the core mission for us here is to track this enduring lineage of standardized harm. We're really looking at how systems of power just systematically standardize violence.
Not through, passion or evil.
No, not at all. It's through cold, replicable procedure. The source argues this whole process only needs 2 ingredients: authority and replication.
You were tracking that.
We're tracking the persistence of that exact hierarchy as it moves, physically from ink to code.
And the mission of this deep dive, I think, is just crucial for anyone trying to understand that intersection of history and computation.
Mm-hmm.
We have to see the Malleus Maleficarum not as some dusty relic of superstitious madness,
Right.
but as a deliberate and very successful technology of governance. It was a manual.
Right.
And we're analyzing how its logic, how it categorized people, surveilled them, and eliminated a target group, continues to shape policy, bureaucracy, and even the math behind computation today.
It's all about recognizing the hammer, not as an antique, but as a design structure that just keeps reappearing in new forms.
Okay, so let's unpack the starting point then. The Force argues that the Malleus wasn't just a book of, scary theology. It was a system engineered to exploit the new machinery of its time.
The printing press.
The printing press. It was built for immediate mass replication.
And what's so fascinating here is the timing. The sheer efficiency of it. The Malleus hits the market just as the printing press is revving up Europe's entire information landscape.
So it spread not because everyone suddenly believed in witches.
Exactly. It spread because it was printable, the cost of replicating the ideology just plummeted, and it transformed this raw local misogyny into a ubiquitous legal infrastructure.
Wow.
Each new copy gave prejudice this veneer of officialdom. It made systematic violence portable, easy to justify.
And what's so intensely ironic is that the architect himself, this guy Heinrich Kramer, he didn't even have real institutional authority.
Oh, not at all. He had to manufacture it.
Right.
Kramer was a cleric whose, let's say, anxieties and aggressive tactics just didn't really fly in the church courts he served. He was actually dismissed for being overzealous in his own time.
So think about that. A man whose fears were seen as extreme by his own peers was able, through print, to elevate his private anxieties into universal official doctrine.
A doctrine that reshaped an entire continent's legal and social structure. It's incredible.
And he got that authority through this deceptive trick, really, involving a papal bull, Simmis Desiderantes.
Exactly. The papal bull, it authorized Kramer to investigate witchcraft in one specific region, the Rhineland. But it never, ever endorsed his book, The Malleus.
But it looked like it did.
Well, the early printers understood the power of visual authority. They slapped the bull right at the front of the new editions, and it just blurred the lines. In an age where the printed word carried this immense prestige of permanence and truth, that illusion of endorsement was enough.
It looked official, so people treated it as official.
Wow.
So we've established the Malleus was everywhere.
Yeah.
But what was it in the architecture of the book itself that made it so effective as a tool? It fused theology, medicine, and law.
This is the operational innovation. It spoke as a priest, a doctor, and a judge all at the same time. And by fusing those authoritative fields, its claims became, completely self-reinforcing.
You couldn't argue with it.
You couldn't. The result was that the category of woman fundamentally shifted from a person with rights to just a defined risk factor that needed surveillance and elimination.
Let's break down that structure, the 3 movements, because this really explains how it made the harm part of the system. The first part set up the theological premise.
That's where the target definition happened. Kramer wove scripture together with this completely misread Aristotelian biology to argue women were, spiritually fragile, morally corruptible, predisposed to evil.
So it wasn't just philosophy.
No, it reframed womanhood itself as a kind of pathology, the weakest link through which the devil could enter society.
Then you get the casework section, the second movement. This is the big leap from premise to evidence.
This is where they gave the narrative proofs. Kramer cataloged and completely reframed the everyday practices of women, especially women who were operating outside of direct patriarchal control.
Like what kind of things?
Oh, herbal healing, midwifery, folk divination, fertility management skills that were often, central to community life. They were suddenly presented as legal evidence of demonic influence.
So communal care becomes conspiracy.
Distributed knowledge, female expertise, it all became classified as an organized conspiracy.
Yes. And then the third part, the law, which gave them the machinery to neutralize the risk.
This delivered the protocols straight to the courts. It detailed investigative methods, it normalized torture as the main way to get a confession, it allowed hearsay, and it stripped the accused of any meaningful defense.
So the book's real innovation wasn't identifying witches.
No, it was telling authorities, step by step, how to manufacture them through sanctioned procedure. It took personal prejudice and formalized it into enforceable protocol.
And the impact was just, continental. Over 28 editions across 2 centuries. Courts just adopted its framework wholesale. Misogyny became portable.
And that is the definition of standardization as violence. Once the courts started following these procedures, once persecution was justified because it followed the steps in the book, the violence stopped looking ideological.
It looked like justice.
It appeared as justice dispensed via proper procedure. The Malleus became an institution in itself.
So we fast forward. The witch hunts themselves, they eventually fade out. But the source argues that standardized logic survived. How does this procedural engine keep running when the goal, getting rid of witches, isn't the state's main concern anymore?
Well, if you connect this to the bigger picture, you see the Malleus was sort of the institutional final blow against Europe's last matristic, land-rooted cultures.
Can you clarify what that means for our listener?
Sure. These were often very local cultures that relied on distributed communal knowledge, especially knowledge held by women, midwifery, ancestral healing, deep ecological knowledge. The Malleus actively criminalized these last living remnants.
And replace them with what?
Replaced their decentralized systems with centralized hierarchical control, all sanctioned by the new state and the church.
And that bureaucratic machine, which was perfected on classifying and containing women, was then, scaled outward?
Exactly. The fundamental logic of the witch trial, identify a deviation, classify it as a danger, and then neutralize it with official procedure, that became the exportable logic of colonial governance.
So indigenous healing practices were reframed as superstition.
Dangerous superstition, justifying control. Indigenous worldviews became heretical. It's the same pattern.
In the inquisitorial courts, they evolved into other institutions.
They absolutely did. That logic migrated. The framework moved right into early psychiatric hospitals and penal systems. It pathologized any behavior that deviated from the very narrow European Christian norm.
So women resisting confinement became hysterical.
Clinically hysterical. Queer people became disordered. The physical container, the asylum, the prison, it just replaced the pyre. The targets changed, but the protocol for identifying and neutralizing difference, that stayed intact.
That makes the category of the risky identity so, terrifyingly flexible.
Yeah.
Once suspicion becomes a procedure, it can go anywhere.
And it did, generation by generation. The risky identity category just expanded. Women, heretics, colonized peoples, then queer and trans communities, neurodivergent minds, immigrants, racialized groups.
The names changed, but the structure didn't.
The names, the diagnoses changed from witchcraft to hysteria to sociopathy to terrorist, but the fundamental structure of identifying a non-normative identity and mandating its elimination or containment via state procedure did not.
Let's focus on that continuum of justification. If the violence is constant, how does the justification update itself?
The source material shows this really clear, chilling lineage. What started as theology fear wrapped in scripture was subtly absorbed into medicine, reframed as biological weakness.
And medicine then slides into psychiatry,
which formalized the pathologizing of behaviors through diagnostics. And psychiatry, in turn, has now become data science, where those old biases hide inside algorithms under the guise of numerical objectivity.
So the authority just shifts from the priest to the doctor to the algorithm.
Exactly.
So the physical violence of the 15th century executions, torture, that gave way to the administrative violence of the 20th.
Yes. We moved to institutionalization, police crackdowns, raids, state-sanctioned harassment, criminalization and containment replaced burning. And today, you see that lineage and procedures that look deceptively clean on paper.
Like what?
Risk scoring, algorithmic denial of benefits, predictive policing maps. The punishment became administrative, systemic, and highly optimized, but it's still punishment and social control.
And it's so important to see how this seeped into cultural norms, not just policy. The source has this one encounter that just drives the whole cultural inheritance thing home.
Oh, it's a powerful detail, really unsettling. The source met a former police officer and a convicted trafficker, both born in the 1920s or 30s, and they spoke almost proudly about procedures they used to roll the queers.
Not as a confession.
No, not as an apology. As a cultural inheritance, a cherished memory of how things were done. It shows that the Malleus text itself became irrelevant. The logic had successfully seeped into the very grain of policing and social interaction.
The culture gave them the script.
It gave them the script, telling them who had authority and who was a justifiable threat.
That brings us squarely to today. The source calls modern AI the new Malleus. Explain how that logic of authority and replication translates from ink to code.
Well, the machinery has changed shape again. Large language models, LLMs, they're the latest instruments built to standardize meaning and language. They inherit the cultural weight of the printing press, but at hyperspeed.
Because they're just replicating what they've been fed.
Right, the key is that LLMs don't reason. They ingest this gigantic digital archive, the archive of patriarchy, of whiteness, of ableism, and they call the aggregate probability.
But hold on, if we know this is a problem, aren't we overstating the historical link? I mean, if we just focus our efforts on fixing the data scrub out, racist police records, biased medical histories, doesn't the system become benign? Why do we still need to invoke the Malleus?
That's an essential distinction. The problem isn't just discrete pieces of bad data. The problem is that bias, in this context, it's not an error. It is the training data.
It's a feature, not a bug.
It's the core feature. The models metabolize the residues of empire, colonialism, systemic discrimination, and they reproduce those historical decisions as statistically necessary default truths.
So transphobia or ableism?
It appears not as bigotry, but as statistical expectation derived from centuries of records. The system is obedient to the archive. And that archive is full of the voices and policies of those who wrote the rules men, whose ingrained bigotry, as the source puts it, remains untouched by time.
And this centralization issue? It's a perfect mirror of the printing press. In the 15th century, a few printers replicated one dangerous worldview. Now a handful of companies control the linguistic infrastructure of society.
Exactly. The race toward monopoly means we are recreating the Malleus pattern. One specific worldview, optimized for a specific output, gets scaled up, absorbed into every major institution, and cited as impartial authority.
The danger isn't that AI will become evil.
The danger is that it will develop maximum efficiency in reproducing historical power structures.
Which means the algorithmic state doesn't need to burn people. It just optimizes harm and makes it impossible to trace. Can you give us some concrete examples of that?
We see it playing out across governance every day. LLMs are woven into risk-scoring vulnerable populations for insurance, denying benefits based on projected cost, flagging suspicious behavior for police, and gatekeeping resources in healthcare or hiring.
All with zero transparency.
Often with zero transparency as to why the decision was made. Harm is delivered without a direct, traceable human agent, making it both harder to see and functionally impossible for the targeted person to contest.
Violence becomes optimization.
Efficient, scalable, and inscrutable. This is procedural harm perfected.
So the essential truth just hasn't changed, whether we're looking at the 15th century or the 21st.
It hasn't. Standardized harm has never needed individual malice. It has only ever needed two things: authority and replication. The hammer always returns, even if it's now made of code.
And we stand right inside this recursion now, watching the logic of the past get perfected by the computation of the present. We have to recognize the hammer in its new digital mask. The models we build today, they aren't fresh starts.
No, they're continuations.
They're continuations of a lineage that has always sought to render some lives legible and worthy, and other lives disposable risk factors. We can either allow the code to reproduce and perfect the hierarchy that print began, or we can intervene in that logic before it hardens into the next untouchable institution.
And the source points out there's this particular exhaustion that comes from fighting both the past and the machinery that keeps resurrecting it in new formats. But if dismantling these systemic hierarchies is the work, we have to remember the subtle violence of inevitability.
The system relies on us just accepting it.
It relies on our passive acceptance. It relies on the idea that, as the source says, doom is also a kind of replication. So the question for you is, how do you practice witness and naming the machinery of standardized harm in your own field? And how do you choose to build something that doesn't inherently require a target? That's the choice before us.